The Forgotten Minotaur King. Side Story. The Journey of Kind. Part 5. Gabe, a Norvi, the undead bone golem fashioned from nearly fossilized skeletal remains, was considered a failure, as so many other discarded experiments of upstart liches, until he became the first sentient and sapient skeletal minion the 20 members of the Vigabane Cult managed to ensorcel with great intelligence. Finding fresher remains more reliable in reanimating, but far more difficult to modify, the preceding sapient skeletons, the cabal of necromancers tasked with originating the Vigabane Legion, were considered the more practical creations initially. Over time, the preceding skeletons began to display personalities and personal ideals that countered the wants of their creators, leading them to escape the confines of their forebears and to spread out among the world, pursuing independent lives. However, those are not the stories we are here to follow. Gabe, a Norvi, showed intelligence and adaptive learning skills while remaining mentally and idealistically linked to the necromancers, becoming their eventual handler of the even more base and slavish Vigabane legions consisting of mindless undead minions of many races. However, as he continued to learn more, he realized that living beings were only a detriment to his kind, and were in fact holding him back. And so, he was driven a step beyond his brothers that simply escaped servitude. Gabe slaughtered the cultists, having the mindless legions rip the skin and flesh from their bones until only blood-drenched skeletons remained. Fearful of other living beings seeking to avenge these mortal cultists, he created a summoning ward upon the skulls of the 20 necromancers whom he had killed, making each skull capable of calling hordes of undead, or even creating new ones as well. He spread them around the lands in the guise of harmless artifacts, lamps, tablets, even coins, keeping one for himself as a failsafe, and to help disguise who he was to anyone who might cross his path. He burnt his bones with a magical fire, blackening them further and protecting them with safeguarding wards etched into each limb's marrow. Eventually, after decades of traveling, he settled down in Monshen, where he, peculiarly enough, started working as a chef for a low-class restaurant called the Spare Rib. His food was unique, edible, but nothing to write home about. But it allowed him to test out alchemical concoctions and minor necromantic experiments on the unsuspecting lower-class townsfolk, with little chance of it leading into an investigation into his sordid past. It was a day like any other, when the Spare Rib's sous chef, an energetic wood elf named Goatsart, who a Norvi thought would make an excellent ghoul monarch someday, bursted into Gabe's lab with a nervous expression, claiming he had a visitor. As Gabe exited the swinging ranch doors of his restaurant's back kitchen, he found himself craning his charred and scarred bony neck to look up into the face of a rather intimidating Minotaur. Kind the Minotaur had entered the Spare Rib restaurant, expecting a dark, dank cave littered with skulls and furniture tanned from mortal beings' flesh. But what he was greeted with was a rather public dining area packed with families and children and smiling couples enjoying low-priced meals and an inviting setting. The walls were lined with props and decor Kind might have mistaken as coming from a more dusty kingdom, such as his own. Ranch-style doors, tumbleweeds fashioned from sea plants, even a full plow machine bracketed the greeting area. As Kind approached the maitre d', a dainty-looking wood elf, he was offered seating for one, but he politely declined and asked to speak with this skeleton called Gabe, a Norvie. The woodling stiffened and became more cordial with Kind, letting him know he'd come to the right place. Disappearing into the back kitchen for a few seconds, the elf reemerged with a bizarre-looking skeletal figure in tow. It had blackened stone-like bones and was wearing a little more than a blood-stained apron and smoking a comically large cigar. Upon appearing from the back, more than half the patrons in the restaurant turned and offered polite greetings to the skeleton, many happily saying his name with a smile and offering hearty hand waves. Taking the cigar from between his burnt gray teeth and tapping off ashes from the tip onto the floor, Gabe gave Kind an up-and-down glance and nodded toward the back for a more private discussion. Before the doors swung closed behind Kind, and his back was still turned to the Minotaur, Gabe began to talk. "So, you're from Goldenrod, I'd wager, based on your attire. Judging by your race and authoritative posture, I'd assume this has to do with the Rakshasas. And, by your manners, one can assume you want my aid. Those recent bullet wounds on your person tell me you've run afoul of the clutch I loaned to Gamberoni's diminutive men. Sorry for that. Anyway, the army you seek can be summoned via an artifact I will consign in an adjacent catacomb to your precious town. However, it will require a significant sacrifice to properly harness. The more significant, the greater the summoning. You will come to know the price soon. Now, if you are done wasting my time, I can teleport you home post-haste. The object will materialize in a few hours. Good day." With a flourishing wave, Gabe conjured an ovular portal of swirling orange and blue energies that mirrored Kind's memory of Goldenrod. However, he simply stood there dumbfounded. How did the skeleton deduce so much about him and his journey so far in such little time? And why was he so willing to help out of the blue, asking for nothing in return? This seemed too good to be true, so Kind began to inquire when Gabe took a great inhalation on his cigar that glowed a fiery red that lit up the empty nose and eye sockets of his skeletal face. He angrily pointed at the portal, and Kind felt gravity shift beneath his feet as he was pulled into the swirling image of Goldenrod, and everything went dark. When Kind awoke, to his utter shock and surprise, he was lying on the floor of his mayoral manor, and lying at the feet of his lovely fiancée he had left so long ago. She yelped in surprise, but quickly composed herself and grabbed Kind, enveloping him in a massive hug, and she began to shower him in kisses. Confused but happy, Kind was suddenly distracted by a loud, braying moo from his front door. Struggling out of his love's embrace, he ran to the door and saw the hulking boss Garos eating grass from the front lawn. Surprisingly, that necromancer had even teleported him. Looking around, the idyllic Goldenrod setting filled him with emotion he struggled to contain. And that was when the whispers began, beckoning him out of town, where he would soon discover a hitherto unknown catacomb near the town, with an unassuming object beckoning him to sacrifice. Hi, my name is Matthew Lewis, and I do the voice of Kycell along with all the additional voices in the Forgotten Minotaur King. I hope you enjoy the podcast and continue to listen into the future. If you want to support my content, please donate to my Patreon, Matthew Lewis Podcasts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Matthew Lewis Podcasts, all one word. Follow me on Twitter at Matthew Lewis P. Or leave a positive maximum star review on your podcast app of choice. If you found this podcast, I assume you're familiar enough with the genre to know how important reviews are to the survival of a channel. And I hope you recommend this to your friends. Or if you didn't like it, you could recommend it to your enemies, and I'll teach them a lesson. Keep it sleazy, folks, and thank you.